Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. And today we have an amazing guest with us. I'm so excited. He is here to talk about real estate. It's Anthony Petz. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tony to introduce us to our guest.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have Anthony here. Anthony is an exceptional real estate investor. He and I have partnered with things in the past, and he has a very methodical approach to real estate investing. And he's been a great partner for me. He and I get together and we talk quite a bit about real estate and really all things life. But Anthony, thanks a lot for being here. I'm excited for people to learn from you.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. If Tony asks, the answer is always yes.
I appreciate that. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your real estate journey, how you got into it and why you got into real estate?
Okay. Yeah. So how and why? I think through college, I just became interested in the idea of like a financial freedom mindset and started thinking about different ways to accomplish that. And my mind went down a lot of different avenues, and I was trying to learn about different things and understand different things and explore different things. And I think real estate, for a lot of different reasons, just seemed to be what I gravitated towards, but also just seemed like it was where the signs were pointing for me. And so I guess bought my first condo, my wife and I did in 2005. And we lived in it and then turned it into a rental that I still have today. And at first, that was how I was doing it. I was working, selling, doing a sales job. Bought the condo, moved out, rented it out, moved into a half of a duplex, rented out one half, lived in the other half. And then started just really getting focused on how I could accumulate more rentals and found different ways of going about that and started to get more creative about how I was doing it. And and then I just started to snowball from there.
You said, Anthony, you said you had a sales job. So now I'm curious, what was, because I imagine that probably plays a lot into like why you're so successful with real estate as well. So what was the sales job? And then what was the bridge like out of that into real estate? Or did you take the sales job to fund your real estate career?
I think that's a good question. I got into sales because I didn't feel like I was very comfortable in that role. And I felt like needing some type of a sales or level of comfort with negotiations and sales was going to be important because I knew I wanted to be in some type of business. And so I got into, it was actually like office equipment sales. It was an outside sales position, which worked really well for me because it was very independent. It wasn't maybe quite as independent as like a real estate agent who's 1099 independent contractor, but it was really close. There were days where I didn't have to talk or check in with my boss and I could just be out doing whatever. And I don't want to make it seem like I took advantage of that. It just wasn't working all day. I was, but it allowed me to take calls during the day, or if I needed to go meet the seller of a piece of real estate, I could squeeze that in, take that as my lunch hour or whatever at any time during the day. So it would have been really hard to do what I did without it, or I would have had to, it would have been different. I'll put it that way. I would have had to figure it out. With a 9 to 5, it would have been really challenging to meet the people I did and do the things I did.
Yeah. And I imagine also all those skills you gained in sales. I'm a big fan of starting your career in sales because that go for no mindset, being rejected over and over again can actually be the best muscle to build because then you can almost be successful in anything. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's
I agree.
fascinating. Sorry, Tony, I jumped over you.
No, I was actually going to lean into his sales job a little bit because Anthony is fairly fearless of that rejection. He and I have walked neighborhoods together, identifying house that maybe can be some opportunity. And we're like, look at that one. It doesn't look like they're maintaining it very well. Maybe we need to reach out to these people and maybe they want to sell. Maybe it's investment property. Who knows what's going on there, but they're definitely neglecting it. And so maybe they need an exit. And I'd probably say, okay, let's find their address, send them a letter, blah, blah, blah. And Anthony goes, let's just go knock on the door. And sure enough, he walks right up, knocks on that door, completely fearless. And it's really the odds of something really bad happening are low, and the odds of just getting a no are really high. But Anthony doesn't see that as a big deal. I've learned a lot from that. I haven't quite got the guts that he got, but I feel like I got that from your copier days.
Yeah,
Hold on, this
I
is
think
amazing. This is amazing. The fact that you go, okay, wait, for the listener who is new to real estate investing, you literally go into a neighborhood park, get out of your car, walk around, look at houses, and then if you see one that looks interesting, you just walk up to the door. I love this.
no, it's door knocking. And I think you're right that you need to get used to no, but I think more what you need to get used to is the feeling of being uncomfortable, because it's still a little jarring walking up to somebody's door. I've had some pretty bad interactions doing that, honestly. I'm not, as no one likes having someone knock at their door and try and sell them something. Or I think people, a lot of times, actually, some people are very intrigued when you knock on their door and you're like, hey, can I buy your house? And they're like, what? Other people have been very pissed off, actually. And I've had people call the police on me, say that I was like trying to canvass neighborhoods so I could prowl. And the police actually came and pulled me over as I was driving away. And I had to explain to them what I was doing. And they're like, I was like, I'm just knocking on doors to see if someone wants to sell their house to me. And the officer literally said, that doesn't even make sense. And at the time I was a little bit, what's the word? Like nervous, and it's police, right? Like very reverent and respectful of the police. But afterwards, it was like, I wanted to tell the guy, I probably own more houses than you do, bud. And I can't tell you how many houses I've bought by doing it. It worked. But yeah, I think the discomfort is really the thing that is important to get used to if you're trying to do anything entrepreneurial. And you don't need to be used to the discomfort of knocking on some random's door, but they're all different forms of discomfort. So just being able to put one foot in front of the other and do what you feel like you need to do, or at least try what you need to try, I think is important.
Let's back up a little bit to like how you started getting educated in real estate. You and I, we've arrived at a very similar spot, but in different paths. You had a mentor, you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and saw the value in real estate, and then hired a mentor to talk through how to achieve that. Where my dad said, we don't know anything except for houses, you better buy one. And I just went in blindly and made some mistakes. And I didn't even discover Rich Dad, Poor Dad until I was a few years into this journey. So can you talk about your educational process into real estate?
Yeah, I think I really started, my first education into real estate was probably just books. It was before podcasts were really big. They were starting to get bigger, but read a few books. I don't know if you've heard of Dolph DeRuse. I remember reading his book. And yeah, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Kiyosaki talks about real estate a little bit. It doesn't have too many really huge books, but I was reading, there were a bunch of old school books from like the 80s that I was reading at the time. And that was my first education. And then I found the local club here in town. It was a real estate investors club, got into that, started meeting people that I could learn from, and was going to the same types of meetings down in Seattle, that area, the whole King County area. But I feel like it was also just, I started trying to apply and implement the things that I was learning through those books and whatever. So the whole thing was an education from there. And for years, I just looked at what I was doing in real estate as getting my MBA basically in real estate. Cause for me, it was a lot of spinning my wheels and trying to figure things out. And it's one thing to read it, but it's another thing to do it, especially when you're young and experienced. But that's how I got started. And then, like you said, eventually I actually had a couple of coaches that helped me in real estate, which I think is great. I think it's great in anything you're trying to do. If you can find somebody with experience that can mentor you along and show you the ropes and kind of help guide you, you constantly feel like, or at least I felt like I was walking a little bit blind through things, not knowing how it was supposed to play out or if it would play out. And so having someone to be there to not only say, hey, try this, or here's how you might approach it, but also to say, just keep the course, like this is going to work out, is helpful. Because I think in anything entrepreneurial, there's no guarantees that you're going to get to where you're trying to go. And it can feel like a pretty desperate mission sometimes. And so having someone who's been down that road and can give you confidence that you're walking the right path was really helpful for me.
So
Anthony, you're a broker. You're a broker, correct?
Yes.
So did you come to that career path first before investing, or did you start investing first and then go to that career path?
It was the latter. So I actually tried for a long time to not be a broker, because what I saw happen a lot of times is that real estate agents talked to me a lot about how they wanted to do more investing, but they were just so focused on being a real estate agent that I think it was easy to put that off. And oftentimes they just never did get into investing. So I wanted to make sure I was really focused on, again, that passive income and building something long-term. And I think when you become an agent, sometimes, not always, so there's some very successful agents who were agents first and become brokers, and maybe it was just, I knew that it would be difficult for me personally and my personality. I think it's easy to keep chasing that quote, easy money, do what you know, and just keep building your bank account. And that's great, but I think that's still like a form of hamster wheel, where if you never find a way to break that cycle, then you're just always checking or chasing the next commission. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that I built that first. And then eventually it felt like it made sense for me to get my license for what I was doing as an investor. And then that evolved into me doing more as a broker, which I've really enjoyed, just because I built so much knowledge in that real estate arena that it's just been fun to, I think, share that with other people. And I think I have a different, I'm not saying I'm anything special, but I think it's given me a different lens to approach real estate with than some other brokers. And we all have something different to offer, but I think it gives me just a different perspective on things than some brokers do, which can be helpful to some clients, and, some clients maybe not. I don't know.
I want to talk a little bit about the leap you took, and I'm going to tell a little story. I met Anthony through a networking group. Must have been around 2010, maybe 2009, the market had crashed, and I was out kicking tires trying to find construction customers. And I really knew his brother a little bit better than him, but I knew Anthony, and I was talking to his brother, Jacob, and he goes, Anthony just quit his job. He's just full-time real estate investor now. And I had been on this course for, I don't know, 5 years at that time or something like that, maybe 6 or 7 years. And I go, BS, there's no way he did that. I go, where's he at? And he goes, he's over at this house. And he told me where it was at. And so I go, I'm going to go out there and see. I don't believe it. And I drive out there, and here comes Anthony crawling out of the crawl space. He had bought this house, and he was doing whatever needed to do under the house. And it made me feel a little bit better that he's in a crawl space. And it does. But I think the big point there is, so I want one for you to talk about how you took that leap, but then also the fact that it's not all sunshine and roses, and it's not always glamorous. Sometimes you really do have to get your hands dirty to make any progress.
Yeah, that was like a pretty crazy time. Man, how do I describe that? That period of time was one that I look back on with extreme fondness, but also like it like makes me a little stressed out just thinking about it at the same time. It might be like the coolest time of my life, but I wouldn't call it the funnest time of my life. It was fun, like a type 2 fun, where there's type 1 fun where you're sitting on the beach, and then there's type 2 fun where you're hiking through the mountains in the rain. And it's fun, but it's more fun when you're done and you get to talk about it than it's in the moment sometimes. But let's see. So what was your question? How was that transition? And
yeah, how'd you have the confidence to take that leap?
Yeah, I'd been working towards it for a while. I'd been trying to establish myself with real estate acquisitions for maybe 6 years at that point, and had gotten some momentum. I was probably owning like 4 properties at that point. No, 6 properties. And no, sorry, it was 4. And I was actually like, I wanted to do it, right? But I didn't have the income there from the real estate to really justify me just leaving my job. It wasn't going to produce enough income for me to replace my W-2 income. But my W-2 income was also holding me back in a way, because even though there was that flexibility, it was still a job that had expectations that I would meet. Rightfully, I committed to this employer and they needed me to do my job. So I wanted to, but really it was my coach at the time, Greg Pinio, that talked me into it. And again, going back to just having someone who had confidence in you, I did not have confidence that I was ready. And he told me that I was. And I remember the day he told me that he felt like I could do it. And I was just, really? And I had so much confidence in him that to hear it from him, it got my wheels turning. So I was like, if he thinks I could do it, then maybe I actually could do it. And so we talked about it a little bit more and finally decided it was just the thing to do. So I saved some money up in the bank. I had 2 other properties under contract. I needed to do some work on one of the properties I own. And the 2 that I had under contract was, one of them was the one that you came by and met me at that day. So it was like, all right, let's just see where we can go with this. And again, having that coach with me gave me a lot of confidence to do it, not just because he thought I could, but because I didn't feel like I was quite ready to do it on my own. Like I wasn't assured in myself that I had the knowledge or anything to do it. So having someone there to support me and give me direction was really helpful too. But yeah, so I made the call. I did it just after my son was born. So I had a brand new baby boy that was like 3 months old when I quit my job, which was great motivation for me. Not only because it was like, oh, I'm responsible for this life now, but because it motivated me in the sense, it wasn't that I was doing work that I wasn't necessarily proud of, but it wasn't who I wanted to be as a office equipment sales. Not to knock anyone who's in that type of sales position or anything like that, but it just was, I knew it wasn't what I wanted for myself. And I wanted to be a person that had the courage to do what they wanted to do, even if it was hard, as a father, meaning I wanted to model for my son in that way. And so that was a big motivator for me, even though it felt like terrible timing at the time. It felt like I should have done it like 2 years ago, but it worked out. And yeah, so that's how I transitioned over there.
Okay. So you quit your job. You got to make money. It's one thing to own real estate. It's another thing to make money off of real estate, which you and I both know and have had some pains together a little bit.
Yeah.
But so when you buy real estate, unless you got a pile of cash, you're probably using leverage. And when you're using leverage, you got debt to services and you got property taxes. And at the beginning, sometimes that margin's pretty small. So can you talk a little about how you take what can start off as a drip or a trickle and actually turn it into a flow?
Sure. Yeah. So those properties I had, I would guess I would call that like a drip or a trickle. And the way I turned it into a flow was, I think it was through leverage for sure, because the only way for me to acquire more cash flow to support my life was to acquire more real estate. Some people can earn enough income to where they can just buy real estate and create cash flow that way. But when you don't have an income, it's hard to do that. So I had to find other ways. So I would say the 2 ways that I use leverage to do that were, one, I started, instead of using banks to get my loans, I started using the sellers that own the properties outright. So they had 100% equity in those properties. And some of those sellers that I would talk to were really open, if not really excited about the idea of financing the property using their equity. And the reason that was an advantage to me at that time was because, one, they still wanted down payments, understandably. But unlike banks, I was able to borrow that down payment. So I might get a second position loan on those properties and borrow that down payment from someone else, like an investor or whatever. So I wouldn't have to put any cash into the property, and then I could create cash flow that way. And if you can buy any asset that's income producing with zero money, even if you're only making $100 a month, if you do that 10 times, you've made $1,000 every month without having to spend any dollars. As many times as I could do that, I would. And then the other way was just leveraging equity I had already created to be able to buy more properties. And it wasn't a home equity line, but similar to a home equity line, where you just find ways to unlock or access the equity that you built in properties. That was another way leverage fueled that flow.
Yeah, I guess a couple of these things. When you get into real estate, you have a couple things going on, and time is generally on your side as you have those rents going on and you're slowly paying off that mortgage, and then rents go up, and that mortgage becomes, just through inflation, rents go up and that mortgage becomes less of an impact on that total cost. Cash flow can go up that way. So that is interesting that with real estate, time really is your friend in that. Just that as time goes on, that loan becomes a smaller impact on it. And then your cash flow can go from what might be a trickle and actually turn into a flow, even on an individual place. And then I want to just talk a little bit about that time period. I was going through a similar saying, only I didn't really know about private loans, and I got stopped for a little while, where you used to be able to have 10 loans is what the banks let you have. And then when the financial crisis happened, they lowered it to 4, and I had 6. So every bank I went and talked to, they said, sorry, kid, we're not giving you any more money. So that creativity that you did was really cool. And I think something to reach out to. And I think something that people should understand is a lot of people want to sell on a contract. There's tax benefits for them. They might want to still get to that income coming in. So it's not necessarily that everybody wants to just cash out of a house. They just may not want to own it anymore.
Can I chime in with a quick question for both of you? So I know a lot of people who are interested in a starting point for this, right? Getting started with real estate investing. And this is also what we're dealing with now in our world and our economy, of course, but they're feeling like very overwhelmed and priced out at this point. And so I'm curious what advice both of you would have for someone who is just starting out, but looking at the picture and saying, I can't afford that. What would be an easy way in, or what could be some things they could start pulling together in their own financial portfolio or picture that might help them get to that place?
I think my answer would be that I don't know if there's any easy way in. I think for me, the answer to your question of what would they start pulling together would be education and just understanding, because I think in anything, I know today we're talking about real estate, but I think it's no matter what it is you decide you're going to get into. It's a lot of people have called me over the years and been like, how do I get into real estate? And they want me to tell them like, hey, go do this. And then tomorrow you'll own a rental, and then you'll be able to buy 10 more by the end of the year. And it's just not, that wasn't my experience. And I think looking back on the period of time that we were in, I think I did hit it really well, but it didn't feel easy at the time even. And I think a lot of what I did was unconventional, not that it just wasn't common. And it took me a while to find the answers. Like I said, we bought our first place in 2005, and I didn't leave my job until 2011. And I didn't really feel like I had gotten my legs beneath me till 2015. I think, it's determining what path you're going to go down, and then you have to start trying to figure out how you're going to get down that path. So for real estate specifically, having a good financial base and foundation is smart, and that's always going to help. But I think the market's always changing, and there's always going to be different ways to approach that market. And I think figuring out what the strategy of the times is probably important. And then just figuring out what are all the things you need to know. I had to figure out construction. I didn't know a lot about how buildings were put together, but now I'm rehabbing buildings. So I needed to learn that. I needed to learn about, like I said, like we talked about already, the sales side of it, talking to people, working with sellers. I need to learn about the financing of it, how to put that together, working with investors outside of banks to put that together. And then all the different creative ways that you can put a deal together. So for me, it was really education. I would say the money was probably secondary, because until you know what you're doing, you could have all the money in the world, but like money can go away really fast. And even if you have money, it doesn't mean you're investing it efficiently or wisely. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's
exactly,
a great
but that would be
answer.
my
No, that's
answer.
an excellent answer. I feel like you touched on a lot of things that people don't talk about, which is the importance of education as number one. And I love that you brought up things like learning about construction. That's usually
Yeah.
not in the conversation, right? It's usually,
Yeah.
what do you need to pull together to get a loan from the bank versus some of these other things, as you brought up, that are just as, if not more important. So that was a great answer. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will say too, just to tack onto that, learning can just be experience too. It doesn't necessarily have to be like going to seminars. And I think all those things help, books, but part of it is just doing it. And things are going to start slow, I think, usually. And that's part of the learning process, right? Because you can read as much as you want, talk to people as much as you want, but until you're actually doing something, that's all just theoretical knowledge. So I think it's just a process too. And that's why I think it was helpful for me to look at that phase of life as getting my MBA, because it's that old adage, don't work to earn, work to learn. And I think that can be a really valuable mindset when you're trying to build and develop something, that it's more like an experiment than it is a project sometimes.
I think Anthony answered that question really well. Education's always when I do business coaching, that's the first thing I tell people is we got to get you educated. The difference is, I think, but a little bit between now and when Anthony and I got started, is that sometimes people there's so much education out there that and there's all these podcasts and all these success stories that it can almost feel like you're looking for the perfect deal. And I think that can be dangerous too, is you're probably not going to find the perfect deal. I've never found a perfect deal, but you just got to find a deal where the math works, where your management situation works, where all the pieces come together good enough that you can get started. I would say the biggest thing that I see holding people back from getting into real estate currently, prices, yes, are a thing. Interest rates have had an impact, although interest rates are lower now than when I first got into it. It's that analysis paralysis. There are opportunities out there. You just have to be educated, and so that when you see them, you can jump on it. And then, like Anthony said, you learn from doing. And that first one, you want the graph to go in the right direction. You want to be covering your nut on it, and you want to be building that, even if it's just a drip, you want to be going in the right direction. But you're going to learn more from actually getting a deal under your belt and having an investment property than, that real life experience. You can't get that out of a book, but you can get a lot of the knowledge to help make that first one a success.
Yeah, I agree. I also want to say one thing, and that is, yes, it's challenging right now. You're right. Prices are tough. Interest rates have gone up. There's opportunity in everything. And I felt like I couldn't do it back then. It felt like it was impossible to get the deals that everyone was saying was out there, but I found a way. And you know what? I know people right now that are finding ways to buy real estate and do amazing deals. So you just have to be persistent, and you have to be creative, and you have to be willing to, again, just learn and keep seeking out ways. I guess that's the persistence, but you got to keep trying to find ways to make it work, because if you just go with what everyone knows how to do, everyone's already doing that, right? And so you have to figure out, how can I creatively make this work? And I just firmly believe it's not It's rarely ever easy, but it's always possible.
We're getting close here on time, but I wanted you chose a route down real estate similar to mine where you're focusing on cash flow. Some people are doing more fix and flips. Not that you haven't done any of those and not we've worked together on some stuff like that, but your focus has always been far more on cash flows than on creating floods. Why'd you choose cash flow?
I just like the idea of income being there, whether I get out of bed or not. I think it's just, I never felt real comfortable feeling like I had to do things just to exist. I wanted to feel every day, whatever I did was a choice. And so I think that was my solution to that, was to build cash flow so that at least I'd check that box and it could make decisions feeling a little more liberated about not feeling like I was doing it because it was money motivated, but more that it was just intrinsically more interesting to me. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Having that flow, there really is something reassuring about it. And I personally think it's easier to find something to create cash flow than it is to find something to create that flood. And I find that there's less risk in that, in creating that cash flow. And if you have that cash flow going, you can be more strategic about what your next move is. Where if you're living off of floods, which don't get me wrong, getting those floods are great and they can help make big moves. But if you have to survive off of those, I've fallen into this trap a little bit where I'm like, okay, I want a flood. And I almost talk myself into the deal because I want it to happen, not because it was the best decision. And if you're living off of those floods, and there's a lot of people that are really successful that they live off of fix and flips, but it definitely is, and you've got to deliver almost every single time. And you've got to be always finding that deal and moving on and turning it.
Yes. I think floods are great if you enjoy what causes the floods. I never had anything where I was so excited about it that I wanted to just repeat that flood. Like the fix and flips were always a grind for me because I didn't feel like I was great at it and whatever. But yeah, I could see people were really into those. And I know people that are really into doing fix and flips. They love just chasing the next flood because they love doing those projects.
Yeah. For me, they're more nerve-wracking. Maybe it's being a general contractor. When I walk into a house, what I envision behind the walls is often a horrible scene. And so I just see dollar signs flying. And sometimes that's exactly right. I've definitely done some flips over the years. My brother and I had one that we did way more to that house than we ever planned. And we just snuck out of there by the hair of our chinny chin chin. And frankly, had the market not been climbing in the right direction at that time, we probably would have lost money on it. We got pretty lucky. Although there are a lot of people, that's their whole thing, and they go in and they do all the work themselves and they do it, and it's a pretty awesome strategy. Anything else you want to leave with the listeners here?
No, I think we covered some good ground here. This has been fun. You guys are asking great questions, and it's been fun just having this conversation as always. And Melissa, it's been great meeting you too. This is cool that you guys are doing this.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I appreciate everything that you shared. I thought this was a really inspiring episode. I feel all motivated and charged up myself. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your journey with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, we'll see you on Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood. Thanks, everyone.